This episode of ChatGPD was made possible by the hard work and creativity of our production team. A huge thank you to Emily Young, Chris Sang, and Alakia Chandran for their expert production, editing, and behind-the-scenes magic that brings each conversation to life. We also want to thank Sarah Topa and the IMS for their support in helping us share ideas, stories, and resources that empower our grad students at every stage of their journey.
Welcome to ChatGPD, our podcast on careers in biomedical sciences. I'm Pamela Plant, and today's guest is Avesta Rastan, who is a scientific visualization specialist or medical illustrator, and who is an IMS graduate from the Biomedical Communications program. Welcome, Avesta.
Thank you.
So maybe we can start by saying or asking you whether you are a medical illustrator or a scientific visualization specialist, and what is the difference if there is one?
Yeah, so the field of medical illustration is obviously specific to medicine, and that is specifically any visual communication of something within the medical field. And that could be anything from like textbook illustrations to like interactive applications to train surgeons, like using VR or something like that. So it's very broad. Scientific visualization can span, different fields. It's not just purely medicine. So like if you work on data visualization for like agriculture or like some sort of
Physics, chemistry,
any of those things, that's more of scientific visualization. So I do both, but my training was in medical illustration.
Okay, so maybe we can get a little more into your trajectory of how you got to where you are, and maybe just describe your program and maybe some of the key people you met or the events that happened in grad school to kind of land you to where you are today and where you are today.
Yeah. So in grad school, the BMC program, it's a 2-year professional master's program, and I believe there's only 5 accredited medical illustration graduate level programs in North America. 4 of them are in the US, and then the BMC one is the only one in Canada.
Wow.
So it is like kind of a special program. And the first year is all course-based. So you have an intensive anatomy course where you do a cadaver dissection lab at the same kind of level as medical students do, except we also have a drawing component. And then we also do courses in like biomolecular visualization, data visualization, also like art theory and, how to use color and contrast and that stuff. And then second year, you still do more courses. So pathology, which might have been first year, but you do pathology, neuroanatomy, and you also have a surgical illustration component where you actually get paired with a surgeon and you get to shadow them in the hospital, which was super cool and a unique experience. And then alongside all these courses, there's also your master's research project, which is one of 2 streams. So there is the animation stream, which is 2D or 3D animation, and it's around like a 3-minute video that you fully animate and make the script and everything for. And then the interactive media stream is more so like you can create all the design materials for an app or something like user interface design, user experience design, that kind of stuff. Or you could create an educational video game using Unity or something like that. So there's interactive media and animation, and then your big project is one of those 2. So we learn a lot of science. We do a lot of drawing for every single one of those courses. Also a lot of digital stuff, a little bit of traditional art, and then animation as well. So it's a very intensive 2-year program, but you learn a lot, and it really does prepare you for a career in this field.
So where did you launch to after your program?
Yeah, so I graduated in 2019, and since
good year.
Then was a good year to graduate. And since then, I've been technically in kind of 4 different roles. So my first role was at a pharmaceutical communications agency here in Toronto. And then after that, in 2020, I decided to freelance for a while and really enjoyed that. And then I got a great job offer that took me to California, where I worked again at a different pharmaceutical communications agency called Real Chemistry. And I worked there for 3 years. And now I'm back in Toronto freelancing once again, because I really enjoyed freelancing in the past. And I like working directly with researchers because I get to learn so much about different fields and cutting edge research in all these different fields, which I love. So that's what I'm doing now. And yeah, it's been quite a journey.
I want to circle back to your undergraduate degree because from what I understand, you have a science background.
Yeah.
So it kind of leads into the question of there's so many grad students in IMS and in related biomedical research fields who loved the visualization aspect of science. I'm always under this perhaps naive impression that you have to be an artist to do medical illustration. And it sounds like there is a huge art component to the program. Do you have to have a portfolio to get in? Do you have to have kind of be an established artist or have some pedigree in art itself to follow this trajectory? And then I'd like you to kind of contrast that to, do you need a degree in this program to be successful in medical illustration? Or can you make it without the degree program in BMC?
Yeah, so for the BMC program in particular, there is a portfolio component, and that is a large part of your application. So they have very specific requirements for the portfolio. And in the last few years, like I think in 2023, they actually updated the requirements. So it's more digital focused now. Like now you can, like one of the required pieces is in graphic design, whereas when I applied, that wasn't actually required. So you do need some art skills, and you have to do like a life drawing, a portrait, and a sequential illustration, which could be a comic. But you definitely need some level of art skills for the BMC program. But that being said, I think in terms of a career in the field, if let's say you don't go to the BMC program and you just maybe you did a PhD and now you want to do more visualization stuff, I do notice a lot of people with a science background, because they're so technical, they're very good at picking up like animation software and like 3D modeling. And I would say you don't have to be as, traditionally artistic to be good at those kind of skills. And there are some people who are amazing technical animators and modelers, but they're not very good at drawing with their hands,
right.
Like sketching. So there is definitely some like wiggle room for, if you're not like a traditional, really talented illustrator, you can still have a successful career in this field, but it probably would be difficult to get into like one of these programs like the BMC program.
And how do you feel the actual accreditation of the BMC program helped you launch into your freelance career or in the other roles that you've had?
Yeah, so there is some particular jobs that actually require a BMC or equivalent level graduate degree. And that's more so within the pharmaceutical communications space. So those studios, they look for grads from these programs. There's a few other places like BioRender. I don't know if you've heard of them. They're pretty well known. They hire a lot of BMC grads, and they do specifically look for BMC grads. That being said, there is a lot of more like startups, small size startups or medium sized startups that they're not looking for BMCers in particular. They just want someone who's good at scientific visualization. So you don't need the degree. And also, if you want to freelance, you definitely don't need the degree for that. I do feel like it helped me tremendously, just in a lot of ways, which I'm sure we'll get into. But it's not a requirement. I do think it helps make things easier because of the network that you gain through the program. And you do learn a lot of skills. Like it's a very intensive 2-year course. So
I would like to unpack that aspect of network after, but I would just love to know what your typical week looks like now.
Yeah.
Could you describe that for us?
Yeah. So currently, since I'm a freelance medical illustrator, my week totally depends on the jobs that I am working on, because I work on a project basis, so it's not like a full-time job where I consistently have work to do. So I do need some structure. I love the flexibility of freelance, but I try to follow like the typical kind of 9 to 5 hours just to make sure I get my work done. But in general, I try to dedicate at least 4 days a week to my client work, which can range from illustration work, like maybe creating a graphical abstract for a research paper, or it could be like an educational animation about a new surgical technique. So those are kind of the variety of projects that I work on. And now I've also, something that's really important to me is personal projects and carving out time to develop my skills so that I also grow as an artist. So I try and dedicate like 1 day a week, which sometimes, client work is too busy, so I don't get that. But I try to spend 1 day a week in total to work on personal projects, professional development, learning new skills, trying new art techniques in my software. So that's kind of how I balance things right now. And of course, as I work from home, I need to get out of the house. I go a little bit stir crazy if I don't. So I go on, walks, and sometimes I'll work in a cafe. And lately I've been trying to organize more co-working sessions with friends of mine who are in the same field, but also work from home.
Yeah, because I was going to ask, how do you get most of your clients? Is it from your web page, or Instagram or social, or how do you expose yourself when you're not doing that one-on-one face-to-face? Is it word of mouth? Because you're probably very well known in Toronto, and does word get around, or how do you find most of your clients?
Yeah, I think it's a variety of all the things you mentioned. For me, I've been very lucky in that I've never actually had to advertise for my services, which is great.
Yeah.
So it is.
Is that unique?
In this field, it's not, I don't think, as unique as pure art. I think in the pure art world, you do really have to put yourself out there because it's much more competitive.
Yeah.
But science communication, medical illustration world is a little bit more small. So there's only a handful of freelancers. So usually people who know the freelancers, they'll if they get a request for a project and they can't take it on, they'll pass it on to their freelance friends.
That's really nice.
So it is, I get a lot of requests from maybe my previous classmates, people I used to work with in some of my previous industry jobs. So it's, a variety of my past, network connections that I've already worked with, word of mouth. And I do think people just find me on social media. In 2020, I kind of had a viral moment on Twitter, and I got so many new clients from that one post.
Can you describe it for us?
Yeah, so that was actually, it was in early April 2020. So I made an infographic about COVID. Yeah. And, April 2020 was so new for COVID. They hardly understood it. We were just talking about social distancing. It was all kind of new. So I think my infographic was actually one of the first about COVID. So that's why I think it spread so fast, was because I felt the time pressure that this was a time sensitive thing, and I got it done and I put it out there, and it reached a lot of people.
And you just intuited that on your own. You weren't prompted. This is just here's an opportunity. Let's go with it.
Yeah, exactly. I was actually working full time at a studio in Toronto at the time. And I just, after work, I would work on this infographic because, as a medical illustrator, I realized that this was a big opportunity to try and help and educate people and to let them know how it actually affects their body and what can they do to try and, not contract COVID. So I just saw that opportunity and I kind of just jumped on it, and I never expected it to reach as many people as it did. And it got translated into, I think, 18 languages, and with people printed it off and used it in hospitals to educate patients, which is...
It's amazing. Yeah, congratulations.
So, thanks.
And I think that really speaks to the power of what you do in terms of storytelling. And I'd like to just have a discussion about that. Really, this is scientific communication, and it's a very specific form of communication, but it is storytelling. And how do you incorporate that aspect into what you do? Is that really what you see yourself doing through the illustrations? You are, describing a narrative.
Yeah, 100%. Visual storytelling was something that was also very drilled into us in our masters, because if you just present the facts, it can be very boring. Yeah. And so to make science engaging and fun, you do have to create a narrative with it, and you have to make sure it resonates with people. So for the COVID piece, I think the fact that I specifically talked about what I was doing in the human body, and I showed that in a, I guess, visually interesting way with, use of color and stuff. So, yeah, I think timing wise and just the medium was really easy to share as well. So like some things like a scrolly telly website, if it's like too long, maybe people will not read the whole thing. But it was just like a very compact 1-page thing, so it was very easy to share.
So is that something you kind of learn in the context of your degree program, your BMC? Like, do they come in and tell you what makes a good narrative, what makes it visually appealing, what makes it tolerable to, 1 page versus 2 page? Like, are those kind of formal aspects of training that you get in the program that you wouldn't necessarily think of if you were just a PhD or MSc that decides to go in freelance? Maybe that is kind of, if you could expand on some of those aspects of the program that you use on an everyday basis that you really feel you wouldn't get if you did not go through the program.
Yeah, I think the visual storytelling side, we were taught more of the technical side of things and like the theory side. And we did also get a lot of like research papers on scientific communication. So there are studies on that, but I do feel like it's something that kind of becomes intuitive the more you work on it. So for me, I don't know, I just, with trial and error, you kind of get a feel for what actually is impactful and like what people will actually resonate with. So it's not like we were told directly, like, you should do a 2-page spread for this specific kind of medium. There was like a little bit of that, but it wasn't super explicit. It was more just, you would get a assignment and then you could be creative with it. So yeah, it was just, storytelling was really a main thing in grad school, but you kind of just have to practice it to actually make it so it's effective. It just takes time. Yeah.
Are there any opportunities like the COVID opportunity that you can see now? I think, one that sticks out in my mind is vaccination. And it's a hot topic now, especially in the US with what's going on with, the new Secretary of Health and disbanding kind of the whole vaccination directive and oversight. Is that something that you kind of are aware? You have to keep in touch with what's going on in the political sphere and the social sphere. Is that kind of part of your creative process on your one day off, where you kind of take stock of what's going on in the world and what might be necessary to communicate at this point in time?
Yeah, 100%. And I do think that's something that I noticed I am really drawn to is I cast a wide net because I'm just interested in so many things. So I'm constantly learning about things online. And I think some of my best inspiration doesn't come from, the scientific field. It's from all these different things that I see online, like whether it's other artists in non-scientific fields, like putting out really interesting media and getting inspired by that, or seeing like a news article on some new environmental like technology or something. So I keep a wide, or like, I cast a wide net, and I look for inspiration everywhere. And I think when you have, the more you see, the more you can kind of see the connections across these different things. And like a media type that maybe isn't traditionally used in scientific illustration, if you bring that into this space, might reach new audiences and resonate with people in a new way. So I'm online a decent amount, we all are, but And
it sounds like that you're just constantly reiterating your role. Like it's not one thing. You're just kind of a distiller of so many different pieces of information, digital information, and really kind of that's informing where you go.
Yeah.
So it begs the question, digital AI, where is your field going in 5 years? Maybe in the next year, in 5 years. And what is the influence of artificial intelligence in what you do?
Yeah, it's a big question.
It sure is.
So I'll start just with the general direction that the industry is heading. I do think that, medical illustration as a field is not exempt from all the bigger trends we see in the economy. Like the last few years, there's been mass layoffs within the medical illustration space. And that's more so in the traditional jobs. So like I mentioned, the pharmaceutical communications agencies, kind of medium-sized startups, a lot of those kind of roles have been affected by the economy and people have been laid off. So I don't want to, sugarcoat it and say that it's super easy to get a job in this field. I think, every year there's so many new graduates and there are limited options. But the flip side of that is, the need for scientific communication right now is so high. Like we need health literacy, especially with what's happening down in the US with all of the scientific funding cuts. I think it's more important now than ever. And I think there's a lot of opportunities for people to kind of carve their own niche within the space. And that's kind of my goal right now is, I'm freelancing, but I would also like to eventually start my own business in kind of a new avenue and not one of these traditional jobs. So I think there's a lot of opportunities to be creative and kind of carve your own career path. And there's always going to be a need for scientific communication. As long as there's science, there's going to be a need for the visual communication of science. So I think it's an incredibly valuable skill that there's always going to be opportunities for. And then with the AI component, like you mentioned, I think, so I'm going to just focus on my field and not art as a whole because it is quite different. But within my field, I've definitely noticed in the discourse, there these bigger companies that are more like pharmaceutical focused, they are trying to integrate AI to, bolster their production pipeline. So that could be like using AI in the pre-production phase to create concept art, help with mood boards, to help create style frames. So more for the inspiration side. And then the production artists will take that inspiration and then actually make things on their own and not use AI to generate the final product. So I've seen that being done. I have also noticed there's a lot of people, myself included, who, because we are artists and these image generating LLMs, they were specifically trained, on stolen art from existing artists. And those artists have not been, paid for their work that has been used. So there's kind of an ethical debate about also as artists, is it ethical for us to use these models that are built on stolen artwork? And I do think there are some companies that are focusing on building ethical AI. So by getting actual approval from artists or writers and stuff like that to train their models, as opposed to just, mass scraping the internet. So I'm kind of excited to see where that ethical AI goes in the future. But of course, it'll be slower because it's going to take longer to generate enough data to train those models. So there's that whole side of things. There's also, the environmental impacts, which I've seen a lot of people being concerned about because I think also as scientists, we're aware of all the environmental stuff going on in the world. And for me, that's like really close to my heart is, I love nature. I'm from Vancouver. I love the mountains and the ocean. So I want to minimize my my footprint, my carbon footprint. So that also means developing AI models that maybe use less water. So that's an interesting debate. But I think right now where it is useful in my field is more so in the like integrating it as a tool within software rather than using it to generate stuff that you could use as the final result. So that could be like, for example, in Photoshop, the generative fill using AI. So let's say you want to draw DNA in a complex configuration, and instead of manually like drawing every single fossil with it, then you could maybe draw a few and then use generative AI to like fill the remaining shape. So something like that could be really useful to help
in assistant capacity rather than a generative or an artistic capacity.
Exactly. And the same thing with animation as well. Animation is so time consuming. So I think there's a lot of interesting work being done to create AI assisted animation workflows where, like, for example, maybe you have the first frame and the last frame, and you want to interpolate the movement in between, which typically if you're doing that, it is quite time consuming. So you could use AI to assist with that. So there's a lot of instances of like non-problematic use of AI within our art production. And the last thing I will say on that note, our field, to do medical illustration, it needs to be extremely accurate because like even the direction that DNA spirals, right? So right-handed turn, and anatomy is so specific. So AI is not quite at that point where it can create anatomically accurate images, and it still has a long way to go in that regard. So it's not really a concern yet. Maybe in a few years, once it gets better, it might be. But currently, it hasn't really impacted our field. And a lot of clients are asking for no AI in the process. So
that's kind of nice to hear as well. But I agree with you. I remember hearing, I think it was somebody in the BMC program talking about, AI generating a hand with 6 bones as opposed to 5, and there's hallucinations from the visual, which stuns me because you have the X-rays and concrete data you can feed the models. Why is the visual aspect of AI lagging behind the language aspect of AI? It just can't seem to generate. So it gives you a little bit of breathing room because you really do need that human to, keep it in check and to avoid the hallucinations. But I confess I used it in kind of an inspiration for a figure for a paper. It's like just for fun. We kind of put it into ChatGPD and said, create a workflow or a visual diagram showing this particular workflow. And it kind of gave us an idea. And then we took that to a medical illustrator and said, can you make this into something that makes sense? Because nothing in the ChatGPT graphic made sense. It was gibberish. But do you see that changing in the near future? Like it's going to be soon when those models are spot on.
It kind of already has trickled into the scientific community. There was kind of some interesting papers that were published with AI generated art that got a lot of backlash online because obviously it was inaccurate and it somehow passed the peer review process. So I think there needs to be more, people in the peer review process need to be more aware of it. And I have seen certain journals like having a very strict no AI policy, or if you do use AI, you have to let them know that you did use AI and how you used it. So I think it's, it's ever evolving, and it's definitely just gonna increase. And I think it's very naive to think that it's not going to trickle in.
It's here and people are going to use it. But I think in general, like through art or language or writing, anything, it's using it as a tool as opposed to supplanting the human that's behind the work.
And exactly.
And, there's always that subtlety in the product of the human. There's nuance, there's, emotion, subtlety that maybe the AI isn't capturing that makes it unique and special, and maybe it's flaws that are make it relatable and imperfect and more beautiful than the perfect composition. But maybe in illustration or medical illustration that isn't the case. So maybe it will be supplanting.
It's interesting, and I think the example I like to use is like photography. When photography came along, it didn't replace artists. It was a new tool that people could use and open up new avenues. But it, like you mentioned, AI is a tool. It's not like art is going to be obsolete. It's just there's now going to be AI artists and then like traditional artists. So I think there is, room for all of it. And there's, within the scientific community, there's just so much to visualize, and there's constantly new research being put out. So I'm not too concerned at this point, but ask me again in 5 years.
We'll have you back in 5 years. If I haven't been replaced by an AI podcast host. I just want to really unpack your transition, because a lot of the students that are listening to this are either in the throes of a transition or are approaching the transition from graduate school to, let's say, the real world. And the importance of networking. You brought that up in your introduction to the BMC program, and I just want to maybe unpack that a little bit with you. Like, how important were the network and the connections you made in the BMC program to getting you into your independent career?
Yeah. So I guess I'll go back to when I graduated initially. That was kind of the hardest transition, was, grad school into an actual career. And that was kind of the biggest hurdle. And to help with that, the BMC program has an industry day where they get employers from around Toronto, and they come in, you print out some of your artwork and you share that with them. So that's something that was very helpful, just to meet people. And it's a very small community, but it's like a pretty tight-knit community in Toronto of medical illustration jobs. So there are certain companies that people know to look for. But that being said, there's always limited roles that open up. Like every year there's 18 new graduates and there's only maybe like 6 new positions or something. So for me, I remember it took longer than I expected. A lot of people started applying to jobs in June, and I didn't get my job until the very end of September. But, I do feel like it's kind of a trust the process scenario where when you find a good fit, it will be obvious. And if you get rejected from jobs, which like I did myself, then, it just wasn't the right fit. And, think something will come along that will be a good fit for you. And I also think as a freelancer now, you could always freelance in the meantime, and then try and keep an eye out for jobs as they come up. So the BMC program was very helpful in terms of letting us know what the employers are, like who to reach out to. But you are kind of on your own at the end of the day to actually apply and network yourself. Besides from that, once I got my first job, which was the scariest part, after that, things have flown pretty easily, honestly. I've been very lucky in that my network is so supportive, and like I've gotten so many freelance roles from my past classmates. I think I do also want to call out that if you have an undergrad degree in science and then go into this program, you already have, potential future clients. So, maybe professors from your courses, if they're also doing research on the side, you could always reach out to them and ask like, oh, do you have any like opportunities where I can create some art for you? Or like, do you need a graphical abstract? Or do you need diagrams for your coursework? Which is something that I did for the health department at Queen's. I created a lot of diagrams for their online lectures for the online learning component. So that was kind of my first job really in medical illustration. There's all these ways to make networks, classmates, teachers, professors, and then once you're in an industry role, you just meet so many more people. And for me, having worked now in 2 industry roles, like every time I have a new role, my network just grows. Mm-hmm. But I do want to say too, like your network doesn't just naturally grow by having new roles. You need to actively try and make connections with people. Yeah. And for me, that's like, I'm a very collaborative person. I really enjoy working with others and sharing ideas and getting their opinions. Like I'm not the type of person who will just get my work and kind of work in a silo. I do like to be more collaborative. So I think that has really helped me. Ultimately, people want to work with people who they enjoy working with. So as long as you put in the effort and you work hard and you produce high quality work, I think that kind of speaks for itself. And once people see the work that you produce and they enjoy working with you, then they will, continue to refer you down the line.
That's right. And of course, it doesn't hurt when you have multiple nature covers that are accredited to your name. Yeah. That probably goes a long way in advertising for yourself. I mean, when you get the credit for that, you look at the photo, the cover credits, and you have your name there. That must really help promote your work and you're a freelance.
But even that took me years to get to that point.
Yes.
And it is kind of a snowball effect, right? The initial year of working is always the hardest. You're just learning like how the professional world works. You're trying to refine your skills because then you're in a setting where everyone's like so much more talented than you because they've been working for so much longer than you. So you just feel more inspired to try harder. So the first year is, the most challenging. And as you learn more, as you work with more people, as you get, bigger jobs, then it does have that snowball effect. And, like you mentioned, that the nature cover I did recently for Nature and Neuroscience, as soon as that was published, I received a job request from someone who saw it. So it does have that snowball effect.
Right. And I think you put in the work, like those days where you are creating and networking and that you shelter for your own growth, you are keeping on the edge of something. So you're not just kind of static within, yes, I'm accepting roles, I'm doing the perfunctory jobs. You're actually growing and offering things to people that others might not because they're not kind of developing that forefront of themselves, really. So I admire you for creating that time for yourself. And I'm just going to wrap up by asking advice from you for students that love the visualization aspect of science, that might not necessarily fancy themselves as artists. They don't have traditional training in art. What advice would you give these students to pursuing a career in scientific visualization and communications?
Yeah, that's a great question. I know, these professional master's programs are a huge financial commitment and a time commitment that not everyone has the ability to do. So I have noticed more and more, maybe people who did a PhD and they've kind of fallen out of love with academia and they love the art component of science communication. And I think that the most important thing is having a strong science background because that's the hardest part to learn. It's how to be able to read a complex scientific paper and break that down into the core components and then figure out how to actually turn that into a visual. So I think, if you have a master's in science, if you have a PhD in science, you're already halfway there, or maybe more than halfway, honestly. And then in terms of the art component, there are so many resources online. There's so many animation courses, there's so many illustration courses. There's things like Domestika where they have really good sales on courses. You can buy a course for $2 and learn from an illustrator who does really beautiful work. There's also, I want to call out the School of Motion, which is a great resource for learning 2D animation. And like I mentioned, a lot of scientific people are more technically inclined. So I think animation is a great avenue for them. 3D modeling is definitely more difficult to learn, but there are a lot of great courses online as well. Blender is a free open source program, so that is a great place to just dabble in 3D modeling and animation if that's what you're interested in. Also, 2D animation wise, there is this guy called Ben Bartlett who's on YouTube. He has so many great videos, and he also has a course for motion graphics that I know many people in my field who have done that to augment their animation, and they found it very helpful. So, there's so many great art resources. And within medical illustration specifically, also if you want to kind of network with BMC people, there's a few things I can recommend. So the BMCAA, which is the BMC Alumni Association, they host a conference once a year called the UNCON. And I don't think it's free. I think it might be $20 or so, but it's very cheap, very easy to attend. And it's just a one-day conference in November. And I've given a talk there before. So they get alumni from the program to come talk about their career or share new art techniques they've learned. And so if you kind of want to just, dip your toes and learn more about this field, I think that's a great opportunity for people to learn more and meet current students or professors or alumni. So I would recommend that. And lastly, there are some podcasts that are medical illustration specific that I think could be really helpful. There is SAYO Studio, SAYO. They're on YouTube. There is also Learn Medical Art, which is founded by Now Medical Studios. They're based in the UK, and they have so many useful resources online for medical illustration. And I think they also have a course now for the professional side, like how do you actually bring a project from start to finish? And I think that's a really difficult thing to learn. So I believe it's under 200 euros. So, way more cheaper than grad school. So if someone wants to learn, the professional side of medical illustration, you could go to Learn Medical Art and check their courses online and their podcast as well. And lastly, Paul Tully, who is also an alumni from the BMC program, he has a podcast on SoundCloud called Medical Illustration Podcast.
Okay.
So lots of things just to, dip your toes, learn some more, and maybe get inspired. And I'm sure all of those will lead you down to a new avenue if you're interested in learning more. So.
And are IMS students able to access some of the courses within BMC? Are they able to take them, or is that completely restricted?
Yeah.
So maybe that's an opportunity for me to explore with you, and we can create a medical illustrate scientific visualization quarter credit.
Yeah.
Stay tuned, everybody. Well, thank you so much, Avesta. This has been so enlightening and so interesting. I really got a lot of great insights from you and really appreciate you being here and sharing your story with us.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you.